Did you know that something like 70% of really complex projects go over budget or blow past their deadline before they're even halfway done? And get this, the reason usually isn't a lack of money. It's an invisible failure in the planning that happens in the very first week. In this explainer, we're going to dive into this project black hole and look at the exact methods used to keep massive, multi-billion-dollar projects on the rails.
Okay, let's just start with a number that should make you sit up and pay attention. 74%. That is the average cost growth on projects that are poorly planned. It's a massive figure, and it points to a huge systemic problem that you see pretty much everywhere.
And look, let's be super clear here. This isn't just a run of bad luck. This kind of insane cost overrun is a predictable, almost inevitable outcome when you start with a flawed plan. The seeds of failure are literally planted right at the very beginning.
You know, the legendary W. Edwards Deming absolutely nailed this. He said the problem usually isn't about people not working hard enough. The real issue is the broken system they're stuck working in, a system that pretty much sets them up for failure from the get-go.
All right, so let's get right into our first section, the black hole of projects. So what exactly is this? Well, think of it as this critical, almost invisible failure point that happens in that very first phase of planning. It just sucks in resources and dooms the project before it ever really gets off the ground.
So that brings us right to our next part, the causes of failure. Because if we have any hope of fixing this, we have to understand what's causing it in the first place. What is it that creates this project black hole to begin with?
So you might be wondering, where does a crazy number like 74% cost growth actually come from? Well, it's not just one single thing. It's a whole series of really basic mistakes in how we estimate and plan right from the very start.
Okay, now this slide. This is fascinating. This comes from research by NASA and the Rand Corporation, who dug into why so many big projects go off the rails. They found 8 main causes, but I want to zero in on the big ones. Look at the top 3: leaving probable scope out of the budget, ignoring probable risks, and just making wildly optimistic assumptions. Those 3 alone are the biggest troublemakers.
So let's just hammer this home. Here are those top 3 causes again. The crucial thing to get is that projects fail because of what we don't put in the plan. We leave out work we know is probably coming, we ignore risks we should see, and we lean on wishful thinking. It's what you don't account for that sinks the ship, every time.
Right. So we've talked a lot about the problem. Let's start talking about the solution in our next section, the control methodology. The answer is in a professional discipline called project controls, and it gives us a proactive way to actually avoid these disasters. And really, the key here is a total shift in how you think about it. It's not about working harder to fix things while they're already falling apart. It's about planning better right from the start. We have to get away from this reactive, firefighting mode and get into proactive, serious planning from day one. And check this out. This is a brilliant framework for that kind of planning. It comes from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO. They laid out 4 best practices for any reliable schedule. First up, you have to capture all the work. Second, you sequence it with logic that makes sense in the real world. Third, you assign resources you know you'll actually have. And finally, you validate the whole thing to find your critical path. That's the one chain of tasks that controls your finish date. You see, when you actually do all that, the schedule stops being just some chart on the wall. It becomes the project's central nervous system. It's the one playbook everyone works from. It's the foundation for clear communication, cost control, and managing your resources effectively. Which leads us to our next section. Logical integrity metrics. Okay, so you've built your plan. But before you spend a single dime, how do you know if it's any good? Let's talk about how you can actually audit the health of your plan. Well, the answer is you can run automated checks. You can audit the schedule's logic for big red flags. You look for things like dangling tasks that aren't connected to anything, or tasks with way too much float, which is basically just the amount of wiggle room a task has. You also look for negative float, a dead giveaway that you're already behind schedule before you've even started. These checks instantly show you the weak spots in your plan. And if you want a great way to think about this whole float concept, this urgent/important matrix is a perfect tool. Tasks with very little float are on your critical path. They are both urgent and important. But tasks with a lot of float might be important, but they have flexibility. They aren't urgent yet. Knowing the difference helps you focus your team on what truly matters right now.
And this quote right here, this nails the human side of things. If your team looks at a plan and thinks it's impossible, they just won't follow it. Why would they?
Stakeholders will check out, and without that buy-in, your plan is just a useless piece of paper.
All right, all of this, it leads us to our final and maybe most important section, preventing GGO. We're going to talk about a really simple, fundamental concept, but it is the golden rule for keeping projects from failing.
You know, it really boils down to two very different ways of thinking. The amateur approach is deterministic. It's where you pretend every task duration and every cost is a precise known number. But the professional approach is probabilistic. Pros know the world is uncertain, so they use tools to model that uncertainty and plan for it.
And the ultimate tool for this pro approach? It's called a risk simulation. Think of it like a stress test for your entire project. It runs thousands of what-if scenarios to figure out the actual probability of hitting your target date, considering all the things that could go wrong.
Which brings us finally to that golden rule I was talking about, GIGO. It stands for garbage in, garbage out. And all it means is that the quality of your final result is completely determined by the quality of your inputs. It doesn't matter how hard your team works. If your initial plan is built on garbage assumptions, the result will always be garbage.
So, the big takeaway here is this. Carefully checking and auditing your plan's inputs isn't just bureaucracy. It is the single best investment you can possibly make in your project's success. It's the difference between building on a solid foundation and building on garbage. So the final question I'll leave you with is, what is your next project being built on?